let's not do that. Yeah. There's a great emotional hook right at the beginning of Rebel Ridge that immediately gets you hating the villain and rooting for the good guy. But instead of cashing that in right away, director Jeremy Saulnier very effectively builds the tension by first exhausting every option that would have de-escalated the conflict. Oh, I think he's on the Wikipedia page. And so then, when our hero, who is played very commandingly here by Aaron Pierce, finally steps up to unleash his righteous fury, it feels more than earned. It feels inevitable. I don't think it's a flawless movie, but I had a lot of fun with this one. It's just a solid, story-driven action thriller, and it's the first of many honorable mentions I have in this end-of-the-year video, in which I reflect back on my favorite movies of 2024 and discuss the 10 works that stood out the most to me. According to my Letterboxd, I saw about 100 movies this year. Not my personal best, but still, so far, I felt like 2024 had a lot of movies that, while not necessarily being instant classics, were nevertheless just really good. Movies like Edward Berger's Conclave, which I didn't think broke any new ground, but which was still a well-crafted fusion between a contemplative reflection on faith and the twisty storytelling of a Dan Brown mystery box. Or A Different Man, a great character study on self-hatred, insecurity, and misguided desires with a fantastic performance from Sebastian Stan. I also really liked The Promised Land, directed by Nikolai Arcel, an old-school historical epic about power, justice, and honor set in the wild Danish heathlands, and starring Mads Mikkelsen as a former soldier turned potato farmer who gets caught up in a political conflict. And speaking of potatoes, if you're at all into food, then definitely go see The Taste of Things, directed by Tran Anh Hong. A wonderful French movie about how love and food and the love for food can become entangled in this greater expression of human passion. There are many more honorable mentions coming up, but I'm going to spread those out over the rest of the video so that I won't bombard you with a long list of titles right at the beginning, and so that we can jump straight into a discussion on the first of favorite movies of this year, which was Carolee Fargeet's The Substance, the story of an aging star who takes a mysterious substance that generates a younger, more beautiful version of herself. Tap yourself. Watching this in a packed theater was just such a wild experience. It was one of those movies where it really felt like the audience reaction was an intended aspect of the movie's overall soundscape. So fun! A lot has obviously been said about how The Substance offers plenty of body horror, provocative images, and how it just overall turns everything up to 11. That's just the way it is. But what really fascinated me is how it used that cinematic maximalism not only to convey theme, but also to deliberately mess around with our more instinctive wiring. Because ostensibly The Substance is a story about womanhood, about aging, and about the societal beauty standards and the obsession with youth that make the first two so frustratingly complicated. Told as a kind of twisted fairy tale in which the princess gets everything she wants but has to be home by midnight or else face dire consequences. Explorations like these have always been rather tricky, as it is very easy to end up glorifying the very thing you want to critique. What often goes wrong here, in my view, is that the movie will falsely believe that you can solve an emotional response, such as arousal, by just explaining why that feeling can be harmful, which can be effective to some extent, but I don't think that fully addresses the source of that response. It just adds context to it. And this is where The Substance body horror comes in. Because body horror, like beauty and arousal, does reach down to that more primal level. And I think it was exactly by continuously oscillating between those two elements, arousal and disgust, that this movie was so effective. Like, it doesn't tell you how to feel or how to feel about your feeling, but really fights fire with fire, combats emotion with another conflicting one. And to me, even if it got a little over the top at the end, it was this sort of battlefield of sensations that also elevated The Substance into a more general reflection on the human body, and on the contentious relationship we so often have with it. It really made me think about how our bodies are not really ours in the sense that there's this gap between it and our sense of self, which becomes especially apparent when it exposes its limitations, confronts us with its fragility, its mortality, and which in turn can cause that strange feeling of alienation and even hostility. A savage yet captivating story about colonialism and man's general tendency towards violence and destruction, set in the empty beauty of the Chilean mountains. This one almost felt like a Cormac McCarthy novel, very contemplative, very rugged, but nevertheless filled with a strange kind of poetry. Second movie from my best of 2024 list, Honor, directed by Sean Bacon. A young sex worker from Brooklyn spends a pleasure-filled week with the son of a Russian billionaire, during which they fall in love and impulsively get married. The Cinderella story, however, is quickly threatened as the Russian family finds out and pressures Annie and Ivan to get their marriage annulled. We are married, you're gonna have to accept that. Yeah, I know, yes. That's funny, sure, yeah. What follows is a fascinating and highly entertaining blend of The Hangover and uncut gems, infused with Baker's eye for those existing on the margins of society. I think this might be the funniest movie I've seen this year. It has these almost Tarantino-like sequences where the tension just builds and builds, and every bad situation somehow escalates into an even greater chaos, which is made all the more enjoyable because of the movie's great cast of side characters. At one point, Ivan goes missing and Annie has to find him with these Russian goons who are played so wonderfully by their performers. Where are you going? Look far. It's 5-minute walk. No. It really adds a lot of texture, a lot of vibrancy to this already intense roller coaster. And it also affirms that at the end of the day, Nora is more than just a slapstick comedy. I think it is also a somewhat underappreciated character study. One criticism that I encountered a few times with this movie is that its main character was underdeveloped. And while it is true that we don't get too much by way of backstory, I do believe this doesn't mean Annie was actually lacking in depth. Like, I don't think you have to sit your main character down in front of a mirror in some pensive moment of introspection in order to communicate their interiority. You can also just do that through action, and I think Enora is a fantastic demonstration of how to do that. For it's exactly in that hedonistic fever dream and later in that tense next up is Challengers, directed by Luca Guadagnino. Challengers is about tennis, but really it's about sex, about masculinity and desirability, and about the complicated interrelationships that arise between these competing elements. But what probably fascinated me most about this movie is how it is about these subjects. For Guadagnino presents his strange love triangle with a kinetic energy that propels us back and forth in time, as if connecting us to the emotional flow that intensifies when past feelings emerge back in the present. I also especially loved the music here and how it is employed in unexpected moments and unexpected ways, cutting in and out in seemingly innocuous moments. It really gave me that feeling of deeper emotions rising and raging beneath the surface. In this sense, the movie is not just highly entertaining with its high-energy presentation, but also offers a meaningful reflection of how our consciousness, our entire sense of self, is always grounded in history, with the past reverberating into the present, wherein 2024 was also the year that M. Night Shyamalan released Trap, which was quite a divisive movie, but which I actually find myself really enjoying as this Hitchcockian thriller that knows how to have fun with its own rather silly premise, while still touching on some deeper, almost psychoanalytical themes about masculinity and about fatherhood in particular. I haven't seen too many people talk about this yet, but that idea of a man split in two, light and dark, the aspirational and the repressed, I thought was pretty interesting. Now, I really enjoyed Furiosa. I think it was a compelling portrait, not just of the titular character, but just as much, if not more so, of the Mentos, who struck me as this total embodiment of senseless brutality, reflexively inciting Desert Saga, my #1 blockbuster experience of 2024, still is the second chapter of Denis Villeneuve's Dune. And yes, I know I said this list wasn't ranked, but Dune Part 2 was just on a whole other level for me. Probably the best thing I can say about it is that it's just completely immersive. Like, I think I've seen it 3 or 4 times at this point, and each time I forget I'm watching a movie, I'm just fully transported into this world which Villeneuve has adapted with such tangibility and such grandeur.